Women are stupid and I don't respect them. That's right, I just have sex with them. Show me your genitals. Your genitals. What? Show me your genitals. Genitalia! Show me your genitals. Your genitals.
Yes, I'm finally back from my unannounced hiatus, and I noticed that there's a lot more of you now than when I first uploaded my video on Lily Pete. I was not expecting that, though I'm glad to have you all on board. I'm sorry for such a delay. I've been stressed out lately, and on top of working much longer work schedules, depression got the best of me. But I'm here again now, and we're gonna talk about everyone's favorite internet pastime: hentai. So we're tackling a video hosted on a channel called PixelitisJess, where 3 YouTubers got together to rant about hentai and ecchi. The users in question are named the anime gamer girly, also known as Chloe, Brookie Cookie, and Jessie the punk artist, who I assume is now PixelitisJess. For the sake of convenience, I'll be referring to them as Chloe, Brookie, and Jessie. Now, I will not be covering all 34 minutes of this video since it's pretty repetitive, which would only make me just as repetitive, though each segment hosted by one of the 3 girls offers plenty of ground to cover. Well, 2 out of the 3, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I'll just try to condense it as much as I can while giving some helpful advice in some of the technical aspects of the video. Though, before we hop into the first segment hosted by Chloe, I want to address the introduction. No, wait, my bad. The 3 introductions, starting off with a 20-second intro card that lists the video's title and the names of everyone involved, followed by the 3 of you verbally introducing yourselves.
Hey guys, this is the anime gamer girly speaking here.
Hi guys, this is Baruch Cookie. What's up?
Sup, this is Jessie the punk artist speaking here.
Now, that much I'm fine with, since I would like to put a face to each of the names, though Chloe, Brookie, why did you 2 introduce yourselves again at the beginning of each of your segments?
Hey guys, this is the anime gamer girly, or Chloe, speaking here.
Hey guys, Baruch Cookie here. That was way too much energy for a Friday afternoon.
The introductions were already done, so there's no need to do it again. That part is already covered. I suppose it's not a huge deal, though if you already got this out of the way, both in an intro card and through an actual verbal introduction at the beginning of the video, you don't have any reason to do it again. And with that out of the way, let's just get right into the first segment. And as I mentioned, I'm jumping around quite a bit since I want to keep this condensed and less repetitive in the long run. So we're going to be starting at 1 minute and 37 seconds.
For those who aren't aware of what hentai is, to sum this up, it's basically pictures or videos, mostly in animation or even more commonly in anime or manga, which contain overly sexualized and pornographic naked shots of characters. In other words, it's anime porn basically. This probably won't surprise many of you saying this, as you may have heard or read about similar situations in your lifetime. For example, in the media. Stuff going on in the media basically. Dodgy stuff. But it's mainly the females who appear in hentai pics or hentai video clips, etc., since they're more stereotyped as being sex models than men are. But yes, men do appear in overly sexualized pictures as well, but that's mainly in yaoi, not hentai, unless they're playing the part of the shy boy being harassed, shall I say, by these overly sexualized girls.
Not necessarily. I mean, you aren't wrong in the sense that female characters in hentai media have heavily exaggerated physical features, since it's supposed to elicit a much stronger feeling of arousal, but no. Guys are given very similar treatment in that field as well. The wording here is extremely odd since you said that this appears in yaoi over hentai, and I don't know if you messed up your wording here and if you meant something else that is a distinct possibility, though there is still something to say about it anyway. If we're specifically looking at yaoi, then there are always the different body types for each character type, ranging from the small shy boy to the giant overly muscular man with a 14-inch long dick, though this is also a very common trait in male on female hentai as well. Very large men or men with very, very big dicks. Hell, even small boys will sometimes be packing their own anacondas. Though the point still stands, these are dicks that are much bigger than an average person in real life, and it's drawn that way for the same reason listed earlier for female characters, to elicit arousal. Many people are very turned on by the size of genitalia, so by portraying characters with genitalia and butts that are much bigger than normal, it gets the job done and grabs the viewer's attention much better. The features do vary between manga to manga since everyone does have a fetish, though guys are very prone to being over-sexualized outside of just yaoi, and it's not just confined to that situation you mentioned before.
So, here are my views on this. First of all, you boys out there, and no, I'm not saying all boys do this, but it's mainly boys. Not trying to be sexist or anything, but some of you boys out there are posting these kind of pictures and demanding and forcing the creators for them to contain pornographic stuff in anime. And other stuff as well. Well, it's mainly anime.
We're stopping right here real quick because I'm already confused by this scenario. These boys you're mentioning are already posting hentai somewhere, I'm not entirely sure where. They're also demanding and are attempting to force the creators of hentai media to contain more hentai? Again, the wording here gives me the impression that you were trying to say something else, though I'm not entirely sure what that might be. I think I do have a clue, though we're gonna get to that in a little bit. If we're discussing hentai anime series and hentai drawings, then why would these boys need to demand them to produce hentai if they already do it? I mean, there are cases where a hentai artist may get asked to draw a fetish that they may not want to depict, which is pretty frustrating, but that's also only in the event that you're referencing the creators of the actual hentai. Freelance artists or digital artists. In that sense, it just doesn't make sense. If you mean publicly broadcasted anime or manga series that doesn't showcase hentai, which I assume based on a later point that you'll make about ecchi, then A, I'd like examples of people demanding this in the first place, since this is a claim that would require some kind of proof, screenshots or video clips or something like that. And B, there's no way in hell anyone can force a series to depict outright hentai in their anime. If we're looking at popular anime, those shows are already based off of manga series. They aren't gonna deviate too much from the original material, so there's no incentive to throw hentai into the show, let alone having some pasty teenager force it onto them. Sure, maybe some people would enjoy a random porno scene in there, but it would be suicide for a show like Naruto or One Piece to contain these types of scenes. They get played on public television, oftentimes on popular channels. They know they can't do it because this means that there is no public broadcasting for their show if they do it, which means no television ratings, which means their show is basically done for. These people cannot reasonably force anyone involved in the production of an anime to include hentai. Is it weird that they try to demand this? Yeah, I would not disagree with that, but you would build a stronger case if you compiled examples of people doing this, or else I'm just gonna have to take your word that this is even happening. It very well could be. I don't think you're lying, but your word just isn't good enough.
Just because you think a girl should have that kind of aspect, is that a word? Aspect about them. No. A million times no. As a girl myself, I find that to be pretty degrading, because not only these people are horny, desperate little effers, and I don't really want to swear because I believe it's only necessary for extreme anger, so I said effers instead of the F word. But anyways, not only that, but like I might have mentioned before in this rant, I think, you're basically stereotyping us girls as being sex models, and yes, I mean sex models, who you just like to come along and toy around with us just because we have massive boobs or whatever.
I guess it's about time I ask this now. Chloe, was this scripted? This whole section felt very disjointed and not well thought out, which is probably the biggest issue I have with this video as a whole, and it will continue to persist. I ask this only because in the description of the video it says that you are credited for the script. Not once did I ever get the impression that these points or arguments were planned prior to recording, and that is quite bothersome. But then again, if this was scripted, I really don't know what to tell you. Now, as for some of the points that were just made, what do you mean by they think women should have that aspect? As in, physical and sexual aspect of a hentai character? That would tie in with the people we just mentioned earlier with guys seeing women as just sex objects. Sure, there are guys that are superficial and do view women only as sex objects, but that isn't solely to blame on hentai. If a guy views hentai because they like to see huge tits, then yeah, they do clearly like to see the huge tits, but not everyone is demanding women to be like that. It's a sexual fantasy that doesn't exactly rule everyone who views it, even those who are super into viewing it. They may like to imagine themselves in the situation, but there is the fact that they're just fantasizing about the characters and the imagery. I could agree that the hentai characters in these pictures are generally just sex objects, because that's really what they are by definition. They're a character who is only being admired for their attractiveness and by them being desired sexually. However, this does not translate into stereotyping real women. Sexual objectification of a fictional character, someone who was created for that sole purpose, and a real woman, an actual person that isn't a work of sexual fiction, are very different, and not everyone who likes the former will give the latter the same type of treatment. This is just baseless. Like I said in the last segment, I can't take your word that this is happening because you haven't shown us actual examples of it happening. You're not going off of anything concrete. This just appears to be speculation of their character, which is not how you should approach these types of topics.
But this is just, it makes me sick just even thinking about it. I mean, oh my god, how horny can you get? This is really offensive. I mean, if you want to post pictures of attractive women, then may I suggest to you to at least post pictures of women with makeup and pretty hairstyles and wavy coloured dresses, because in that way it wouldn't make us girls feel the uncomfort we have to feel by having to look at those disgusting porn pictures of female anime characters showing up in our faces. And P.S. The makeup and the wavy hair and the pretty hairstyles are more attractive anyway.
Aw, but didn't you know?
I can't have sex with your personality, and I can't put my penis in your college degree, and I can't shove my fist in your childhood dreams, so why you sharing all this information with me?
On that note though, I'm still not sure where these people are posting this stuff. If it's on social media, then plenty of those sites actually don't want people posting pornography on there, which is why you can flag those posts or a page for showing shit like that. Sure, sites like Tumblr not only allow it, but got widely popular because of it, though viewing things in safe mode will wildly limit your chances of seeing these images. I know that you'll be mentioning this later, and I'll get to that, though you've mentioned people posting these pictures twice now without narrowing down which sites they post them to, so I was left conflicted. Though for the main point, you want them to just post images of women looking pretty and nice with makeup on? Pretty much something non-pornographic. I'm gonna come back to this in a moment because it'll be important for something that really bothered me towards the end of this segment. Though I will be skipping a little further ahead since she mostly discusses how people posting porn disregards people who don't want to see it. We literally just covered this part regarding social media, and if we're considering sites like Facebook, then I fully understand what she's discussing and I agree with that. She talks about why this is the reason for rating systems on film and video games and books, though this isn't the most accurate claim since these rating systems are mostly backed and made for parents and preventing their children from viewing material they aren't reasonably old enough to handle, though it's not actually worth getting into an entire interjection over. While mature filters operate similarly, they're ridiculously easy to bypass, as opposed to real-life vendors being able to verify your age. I only bring it up because it gets us into this tangent that she goes on.
People these days are literally taking this for granted just because they think, oh, I am such a good artist, and because that's the case, I can get away with posting pretty much anything without the filter on it. Who cares about those stupid filters anyway? People are still going to enjoy my amazing artwork even if I post hentai and inappropriate pictures. No, guys, that's not the case. And no, don't think I've come across anyone who has said that in my time on the internet if you ask. But don't think that's true.
That actually destroys your case. If you said what I think you said, the wording here is so poor that it could be mistaken for something else. Chloe, you're ranting about people who do this to begin with, but then claim that they behave like they're above mature filters because their artwork is amazing, and then you straight up admit that you haven't seen anyone outright say this. You are just assuming that this is the case, and that is not good enough for a rant. I mean, I'm sure people like this exist. I've known some pretty stuck up and snobby digital artists, but just like your examples with the boys posting pictures online, you don't have examples of people doing it. This is just speculation. Rants like this are supposed to present a case for your side, and so far I haven't been given enough reason to care. She spends the next bit reiterating why these artists are in the wrong for thinking this and wraps up her thoughts on hentai by going over everything that she just said before, and ends off by saying that she's fine with people liking hentai, although she does say this.
For those who enjoy watching or looking at hentai, go ahead. That's fine by me. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion anyways. Just because I despise it so much doesn't mean that you have to as well. And you may have your reasons for liking it, but just don't use it as an excuse to be horny and desperate or go posting those kind of stuff without the filter on it. Just enjoy watching or looking at it if you like hentai.
Most of that is fine, but don't use that as an excuse to be horny? Do you not understand the point of porn, mate? That's the only excuse you need to look at porn. That's just a given. She then goes on to explain that she doesn't like ecchi for similar reasons to hentai. It's offensive, disgusting, but not quite as bad as hentai in the long run. So I'm gonna save you all the trouble of listening to repetition.
10 million points for Griffin Puff!
Ecchi. Again, for those who aren't familiar with ecchi, you may be asking the same question for those who aren't familiar with hentai. What is ecchi? Well, I can tell you that ecchi isn't as bad as hentai. Ecchi, also known as harem, also occurs mostly in anime, but doesn't have sexual themes in them, but are suggested. It's more perverted scenes with revealing outfits, underwear, and boobs that occur in ecchi, etc. That's how I can sum it up, basically. Sorry, I'm awful at explaining things.
That's also not an accurate explanation. Ecchi is suggestive by nature. It's soft-core compared to hentai. Also, it's not referred to as harem. Since it's on the topic of anime, harem is a subgenre that focuses on multiple women trying to gain the love and admiration of a person they care about. Ecchi plays a big role in it since these shows tend to be very suggestive or sexual by nature, containing lots of ecchi and appealing to a teenage fantasy of multiple women trying to win over one man. And because there's a lot of repetition, I'm skipping to about 13 minutes in.
And I've noticed that there's one heck of a lot of fan service in it. And I know Fairy Tail isn't a mature rated anime, I think it's PG, but for an anime like that where it's meant to be about fighting and friendship, do you really think that much fan service is necessary? And I know it's not just Fairy Tail that has that, but I'm just using it as an example. The shows such as Fairy Tail, and you can probably think of more examples than I can that contain this, but I feel that having too much fan service and ecchi in those kind of shows is pretty unnecessary. Well, really unnecessary actually, in my opinion anyways.
Here's the thing. I don't disagree with the core message of this, though that's purely from my own personal opinion because I also feel as if too much fan service ruins a good anime series for me. However, that's mostly why Fairy Tail doesn't appeal to me to begin with. The fan service is a common staple of a lot of shonen series, because it mostly appeals to hormonal, sex-driven teenage boys. But the creators know exactly who they want to appeal to, which is why these elements exist to begin with. Yes, they are worth criticizing, and I realize you're about to do that, so I'll just hear you out real quick.
And this is why I think this. Number one, it kind of ruins the plot or purpose of the anime, i.e. for like One Piece, say One Piece, for One Piece for instance, the story consists of following dreams, going on an adventure, and maintaining strong friendships along the way.
That is highly debatable. Now, I do think that these scenes can get distracting, though you even said yourself. While yes, shows like Fairy Tail and One Piece have a lot of action and exploration, those are more integral to the show's plot and world building. That's just one part of making a narrative. You also need plenty of other things, character interaction and developing personalities. The show needs characters to make the story work. And there's one last thing, the fact that these shows also contain a lot of of comedy, which is usually where the fan service lies, sexual situations being played up for laughs. I know that you're gonna mention this later, and you will state it there, though Fairy Tail constantly does this, even with their male characters. This is probably one of the two main reasons why fan service is used in the shows, and aside from, well, just appealing to the audience. Believe it or not, these interactions actually play up on their charm and then makes these characters more memorable in the long run. If you're developing them in the story while capitalizing off of their fun interactions, including the more sexual ones, then you're basically just getting a bunch of characters that everyone's going to remember, and that ultimately makes for a better experience. Now, you're right, this can get distracting, but at that point, that's just a personal opinion. Other people don't see it that way, since of course they're more inclined to appreciate seeing these scenes than you are.
2. What about those who dislike it and find it annoying and disgusting? People like me and my friends don't want to see our favourite anime programs being sabotaged with millions and millions of perverted, half-naked scenes. Thank you very much.
Then I don't know what to tell you. For starters, the author is intentionally putting this into their manga, which translates into that being put into the anime, so again, not sure what to tell you. Go find something that doesn't do this. Also, if I'm able to go back to something you said earlier, I just want to get this out of the way real quick.
Take a show like Fairy Tail, for instance, and even though I haven't watched it yet, and I'd really like to see it since it sounds like an awesome show with action, a great story, and great characters in them too. Mostly the characters. Oh, I've seen some adorable hot ones out there. Especially Natsu and Grey.
Fairy Tail's male fan service also probably bothers some people. It's not something I enjoy seeing, that's for sure. You've gone through this rant talking about how ecchi and hentai are offensive and disgusting, how fan service ruins the anime, and how you don't like seeing it. Though, that's only from the female side. You're more than happy with it when the guys are given the ecchi, fan servicey treatment, so it shouldn't be hard to figure out why it exists in the first place. And what would your reaction be if someone asked the same thing? What about me? What about the people who don't like seeing a well-toned naked man, or one naked man seductively hugging another, or a naked man being spanked by another man? Hell, that earlier comment you made about how guys should post pictures of women in dresses and makeup could easily apply here. I mean, sure, the degrees are different since it's not porn, but it's still uncomfortable for people to see ecchi if they just have no inclination to want to see it in the first place. If it's uncomfortable for you to see ecchi in the sense that it glorifies the female body, then why make such a U-turn like this? Fan service exists because it garners attention for those who find it appealing, which probably explains why Fairy Tail has so many fans to begin with. It caters to men and women in the fan service department. I'm sorry, it's just none of this is strong enough of a case to convince me of anything.
Again, I have no problem with people who enjoy watching ecchi, but it shouldn't be an excuse for demanding the creators of the anime to have truckloads of ecchi scenes contained in them. And if you want to watch anime that contains that much ecchi, may I suggest you look at the genres of the anime and see where it says ecchi. In that way, the animes that lie in the category of ecchi or hentai, you can demand pretty much whatever sexual theme you like for all I care. But please, don't ruin other animes for other people that don't lie under the category. Thank you.
Oh my god, these animes with ecchi already had ecchi in the original source material to begin with. They were designed to be this way from the beginning. These fans have nothing to do with fan service being involved in these shonen series. This was by design. Anyway, that is basically the end of her segment, so I'll just be moving on to Brookie, who has the shortest segment of the three, being a total of 4 minutes long, though we're only really covering a little bit of it, and you're about to see why here in a moment.
My rants are always kind of short because I don't really know what to say. I mean, they'll have things planned out like, oh, we're gonna say this and everything, and I say that it's, most of it's not my problem. If you like hentai, then I'm not gonna stop you. To be honest, I'm not really bothered if you like it or not.
I guess this is ultimately why I'm more displeased with this segment than anything. Since we're getting the implication that you're ranting about this, then sad to say, Brookie, you're not really needed here if you don't have any strong opinions for or against it. And I hope this doesn't sound mean, it's just that the bulk of this video so far has been very negative towards hentai. I guess I'm just disappointed that you weren't really capitalized on in this whole thing. I don't know, it's just, if you didn't really have any strong opinions to begin with, you didn't really need to appear in this. So yeah, that was brief, and that's really all I had to say about that segment. She does say not to spread the pictures around, though we already kind of covered that before, so the only other thing worth discussing wasn't worth discussing, sad to say. Now we're getting into the final segment. I honestly didn't know what to expect from this segment because ultimately what I saw from these last two wasn't really giving me high hopes, but actually, as far as delivery's concerned, things pick up from here. She's a lot more coherent and can lay out her points better. It's just the subject material. Well, we're about to get into that.
Hey guys, this is just gonna be my part of the rant on hentai and ecchi. I think that's how you pronounce ecchi, right? I don't know, I'm pronouncing it ecchi. Anyway, I'm sure you guys probably know what hentai and ecchi is by now, but I'm just gonna give you a very brief summary of them both. Because, you know, this is my part of the rant, and I want to pretend I'm useful.
Now, this really isn't required, since Chloe already established earlier what these things were, along with Brookie giving her own explanation in her segment. Realistically, only one of you needed to do this to begin with. Granted, you explain it better than your friends do, though it still didn't really need to be done more than once. Now, I'll be bouncing a little ahead since we're not really gonna go over the explanations again.
The main 3 reasons why I disapprove of hentai is number 1. It's very offending towards females and women. Because if you guys look at hentai pictures, if you look them up, well, I'm not asking you to look them up because it is pretty disturbing. But if you have seen them, I think you can agree that it's the men overpower the women. Like, it's never the guy being sexually assaulted, it's always the female. Which I find personally very sexist. Because it shows us, and the audience, watching this beautiful art, it shows us that this person is trying to show that women are basically nothing. That the men overpower women, that the women look up to men, and that women are just big sex toys that any guy can come around and play with as much as they'd like.
Not quite. Now, the biggest point of contention I have with you and Chloe so far is that you're using the term hentai in such a broad manner, referring to what I'm guessing by the language you 3 have used are images that you found through Google search, or at least you specifically. And sure, I'll grant you one thing, the very first picture I found was a man dominating a woman, though scrolling through you'll find various mixes of different types of images, some being simple vanilla sexual acts while some being balls to the wall hardcore porn. It all just depends. Though the depiction of hardcore acts isn't outright sexist just because it shows domination, namely due to the fact that women do in fact like being choked or being abused. I would know. I have dated people who enjoy this kind of stuff. They get off to it. It may make you uncomfortable, and I completely understand why, but it isn't sexist because of this. And just as well, there's something you also need to consider outside of just fetishes and hentai categories. Hentai manga. Well, I guess they kind of correlate with one another, but fucking whatever. Namely the fact that everyone is turned on by something, and it will always be different. If I went to a site that hosts hentai manga, I guarantee you I'll be able to find something that depicts women dominating men. I've seen animated hentai series that depict this. While the woman is still the object of sexual fantasy, she herself is taking charge and forcing herself onto the man. Even then, we can take it a step further and show stuff like domination and power play where the man is in complete submission. So it's basically just a total 180. They flipped the roles where the woman is in complete control. I guess what I'm getting at is that hentai itself isn't as simple as that, nor is it sexist in its depiction outright, especially when considering a simple art piece. If the art was drawn for the specific purpose of promoting sexism or something along those lines, then sure, I could see your point, and I would be totally turned off by it as well, but that's not what I'm seeing here.
10 million points for Griffin Puff!
Number 2. In my eyes, when I see hentai, for whatever reason, the female never looks happy. You know, like... And where I'm going with this, guys, is that, yes, hentai, in my eyes, it classifies as rape.
Oh no, she did not just say that! Yes, I did, Peter! I just saw it!
It does. It looks like it to me. It looks like the female is either screaming, crying, squirming, or whatever, but definitely not taking it in a good way. So, may I add, that's a really horrible thing to draw. That's not something to praise, because it does happen quite often, unfortunately. And for you to make art on that intentionally, that's really offending for people that actually have been in that situation.
I mean, in the case of actually drawing rape, then I would personally agree. However, we're also seeing this argument against hentai being used in broad strokes again. Now, sure, the art isn't always clear since facial expressions with characters like this don't always look too clear. I mean, something like this is about as subtle as a kick to the groin, but then you have pictures like this. The style is not among my favorites for a similar reason that you brought up. To me, the faces look very awkward and it doesn't always appear as if they're enjoying the sexual act, though that isn't always the case. One thing you also need to consider is that when people are moaning or, taking pleasure in it, they're not always smiling or expressing their happiness in it, so you kinda gotta keep that in mind when looking at these images. Now, say you find a picture that depicts someone crying, and depending on the context, that would be hinting at rape, though the issue appears to be that you're not reading into these images quite properly, so you're getting a completely different vibe than what's being intended, and that ultimately is a huge issue with this segment.
And last, but certainly not least, it's not art. I don't care how well you draw dim boobies, it's not art. And the reason why for this, guys, is that art needs to be a variety of things. It's not just about how good it looks, it's a variety of things. Number one, how creative it is. Yes, how good it looks, how realistic and stuff. And also what message it sends.
Oh my god, this is such a weird argument being made from an artist. And if there's one thing artists hate, it's when you call something not art. Art in and of itself is pretty much a form of creative expression, but let's just stick to drawings for the sake of argument. You say it needs to have all of those components on top of having a message to send. That is not the main point of art, and you very well should know that. You can simply draw something just for the sake of making it, and someone will appreciate it for what it is, a very well made picture. And hell, if I draw a picture of a flower just to draw a flower, I'm sure someone will read more into it than what I intended. Now, sure, hentai is mostly just there to be viewed sexually, but that's all it needs to be. Someone is still admiring the skill and technique of the colors, the line work, the realism. That's all you realistically need to appreciate something and consider it art. What in the fuck are you talking about?
That is what makes art. Art is very similar to music in a way, because it requires a message to be sent, whatever it may be. It could be very simple, or also very thoughtful. So, what message are you sending when you make hentai? Are you sending us that women are just sex models, like Chloe said, that any guy can play with as much as he'd like, and the women can't do anything about it? Are you saying that women are nothing and worthless? Are you saying that, men overpower women, etc.? If that's the case, then that needs to be changed.
Oh my god, I don't know how much of this I can take anymore. I know that I said someone can read into a picture and find more meaning in it, but there also exists the option of someone reading way too deep into something, or someone taking something completely different from what was originally intended. I'm noticing that your perception of hentai is coming from possible misconception of the artwork. Unless you're looking at the most hardcore rapey stuff out there, then I don't see what you're talking about. As I said, hentai is not just confined to guys using girls. Girls can have dicks and just destroy a fucking man. There's more to it than what you're really letting on. It may not be for you, and I get that, but I'm sorry, you're just seeing something in the entirety of hentai that doesn't rest on the surface level. The rest of her hentai segment gets really repetitive, and her segment on ecchi is just more of the same that we've already heard, though she does end off on a positive note by saying that she is fine with people liking hentai and that you shouldn't be offended by her stance. So I'm ready to stop and give my final thoughts, though I'm going to be addressing each of you individually first. Chloe, your problems seem to come from the fact that you're not really able to speak off the cuff very effectively, so that leads to poorly constructed arguments and a lot of repetition. Though even if these issues didn't exist, some of your arguments would not have been saved from that fact. I guess my advice would be to compile a script or write out some bulletin points so that you have some idea of what you're gonna say next. Brookie, the issue you seem to have ultimately comes down to the fact that you didn't have much to contribute to, as you weren't really able to provide us with anything as opinionated or hard-hitting as your friends. I guess this issue won't exist if you do a video where you have something to work with, sort of like the last rant you three did. At the very least, your segment was shorter, so it felt a lot more refreshing by that fact. You are also a very likable person, and I did enjoy listening to you, but you seem like someone who works a lot better when tackling something that they do have strong feelings on. Jesse, you provided me with the most substantial segment of the bunch, since you were able to get your points across more clearly and effectively than anyone else in this video. It's just that you made some very bad points. From the misconceptions and misinterpretations of artwork to the standards for what you do and don't consider art, which is very contradictory to art-related discussions, you also suffered from the same repetition that Chloe suffered from, and it did harm you in the end. It's not as bad as hers, it was still persistent, and we really could do without it. That being said, I do think that the three of you should pursue these types of videos a lot more, since you are all very likable people. Even with the points not really hitting with me and some of them getting right on my nerves, you all come across as opinionated people who don't want to make people feel like your thoughts are law. You respect opposing opinions, you seem very pleasant, and that's really all you need to be solid ranters. If you guys are past the whole ranting thing, then I understand, but if you ever want to do them again, then I say go for it. I'll wholeheartedly support you. Hopefully you can take what I said into consideration, and please don't take any of this personally. I didn't make this with the intention to belittle or upset any of you, and I really hope that didn't come off that way. I just had a bunch of issues that I wanted to get off my chest. Anywho, I'm gonna get back to working on everything else that I wasn't able to release last month, so I guess I'll see you all then.